Listen labels that get in and they're often surprised at the lead time for vinyl. And, I have no say in that. So all I can do is try to help them. And, we have a couple plants that we like to steer people to that do really good work. But you have to be patient. And there's a lot that can go wrong in the process. It's an analog process. So you can master a record and someone can accidentally scratch the lacquer, or it can get dropped, or there can be a pressing issue. There's a million things that can happen that can delay it. So especially with indie bands, like, don't schedule a record release party till you have product in hand. That's always kind of the inside joke here. Someone's like, well, my record release party. It's like, well, unless you have records, don't schedule the record release party. Because a lot of things can come up.
My buddy did a record release party here. He didn't even do vinyl. He just did CDs, and he didn't have CD cases. He gave out CDs.
Yep. Yeah.
It was pretty hilarious.
Yeah, it happens.
Yeah, totally. Well, do you have any practices to kind of work faster in the studio? Like, obviously you have, people helping you out. Do you do anything that like gets you in I guess maybe even in a headspace quicker to kind of get into mastering?
Coffee. like everybody else. I try to really just get in when it all kind of starts on my ride to work. So whether I'm on my motorcycle, which is as much as I can be, or in my car, this is kind of new that I've started in the last year and a half. I will not listen to the radio, and I'll wear earplugs and completely isolate everything and just sort of have a nice, relaxing, quiet drive to work. And as a motorcycle rider, I wear earplugs all the time anyways. So I like to isolate myself, and I just like to kind of clear my head and sort of lose all of the outside stress of life before I get in here, so I can be a clean slate, because I think that's what the client deserves. I don't want to bring any of my emotional baggage. This is a very emotional job. It's like a technical job, but it's very emotional too. And I don't want to bring any weird baggage I may have. I was like, had a hard morning, and it took forever to get my kid off to school, and he was screaming, and I couldn't get the cats in, and blah, 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 all the normal life crap. And I've got about a 35-minute drive from where I live, sort of outside of Nashville, and it's perfect. Just helps me wind down. And then when I get here, I kind of go through my ritual of just sort of tuning my ears for the day and listening to stuff I'm familiar with, and maybe even pulling up a couple of the recent projects I've worked on. And that's kind of how I get in the zone. And I'm a big fan of taking breaks.
Yeah. How often do you take a break during the day? Like, are you, is it like set, or is it just whenever you feel like
whenever
fatigued?
I feel like it? I'm a pretty frequent breaker, and it's usually walking down the hall just to bullshit with Dan or Raylan here. And oftentimes it's not even work related. I just need to clear my head and like get out of the zone for a minute and come back with my battery recharged.
Yeah. Do you take off weekends? Do you take off time?
I always take off weekends. So, I have definitely worked on weekends, and I spent years working weekends, and I spent years working 80 hours a week. And I'm at the point now, and if I have to work a weekend and it's a real big project and it needs to happen, I will make accommodations. But for the most part, weekends are my family time. I have a 5-year-old son, and that's his time. And as my buddy Reed says, there's no musical emergency. So I try my best. I'm lucky enough to be in a position where where I have an assistant and a management team and an infrastructure here. So I try to be off grid on the weekends. I mean, working in this industry is tough enough on families and relationships. I really try to be off the grid on the weekend.
Yeah, I totally relate to that. I actually I practice the Jewish Sabbath, so getting a full 25 hours with 0 cell phones is actually the highlight of my week. It's just being totally present. So yeah, I can't recommend it enough.
That's fantastic.
So you just kind of literally off the grid.
I really kind of the ringer on my phone stays off all weekend, and I just kind of will check it occasionally just to make sure that there's no family emergencies or anything like that. But yeah, I find that just taking that time off for yourself and for your family. It just allows you to do better work when you hit the ground running on Monday.
Yeah,
You know?
absolutely.
Yeah.
I have a question for you that's just kind of general. Like, what keeps you inspired? What keeps you, moving? Like, why do you come into the studio every single week?
There are so many reasons. I still feel completely energized and so privileged to be able to do this job. And I feel fortunate that people trust me with their child, essentially. And we're the last, the last cog, like the last, piece of the puzzle, the last people in line to make sure that the record sounds as good as it can sound. And I don't take that for granted. I fully realize that my worst day at this job is better than most people's best days at their job.
Yeah.
So this is the greatest job in the world. I love it. It's allowed me to meet some of the most amazing people. There are a lot of great people in this industry. And be energized through people's creativity. I love it. I try really hard, and I never want to be jaded. And I feel like the moment that I'm jaded is the day that I just stop doing this.
Yeah.
Because it's not fair. It's not fair to my clients. It wouldn't be fair to my clients. Like, I want to be as fresh as possible, and I want to love this job, and I do. This is like, I can't think of, there may be, one or two things that I would do other than this if I had to. And I probably wouldn't like them as much as this. So I feel really fortunate, and that keeps me going, and my supportive family. And
yeah, I love your authentic enthusiasm. How much you just love the job, love the art, love the, like, also just doing it for the people, right? Because it's a service industry, and you're making good by the people you're working for, and I love that.
Well, kind of getting back to how we were started and sort of our ethos, that was the most important thing. Like, not only do I want to be the best mastering house, I want to be the friendliest and nicest, and not because we're pandering to people, but because we genuinely love what we do, and we appreciate everyone we get to work with. And this is super fun. It's awesome to get to come in here and to hear music before anyone else gets to hear it. I can't really think of a cooler job for a music fan, and I'm still a total music nerd. We all are. And that's the funny thing. We're all like busy, listening to music when we're not doing this. When I'm not like listening to podcasts or NPR or something. but we're generally like huge fans of music.
Love it, man. I ask this question to every guest who's been on the show, and I'm going to ask you this as well. When you were getting started, was there something that you maybe did or maybe didn't do that, you now looking back on your earlier self say, hey, like, keep at that, or maybe don't do that? What would be that one thing that you would tell your earlier self?
I think what I would tell my earlier self when I was first starting out would have been, come up with a solid business plan. I got really lucky because I just sort of winged it, when, kind of backtracking a little bit. Infrasonic was originally just me, and I had a very small indie recording studio that I did some mastering out of. And when I met my first partner, Jeff, we grew it into a much bigger business, but we didn't really have a plan. My plan was, I sold the house that I owned at the time, and I moved into a friend's closet. I'm not joking, not a walk-in closet. I lived in a closet to start this business. Gosh. I sold my house and moved into a closet.
From the ground up.
Yep, and maxed out all my credit cards. That's what we did. I mean, it's hard for, two guys without any real assets or business background to get a bank to loan you money.
Yeah.
So that's what you do. And we were lucky enough. We had a little bit of help from a few outside investors, but for the most part, we just went into a shitload of credit card debt and got lucky. I would not necessarily recommend that to anyone else.
That sounds rough.
It was. I mean, it took me years to kind of get to a comfortable point because I was always building the business and didn't have a very good plan, and frankly, always operated with way too much overhead. And took me years to finally figure out how to find a better balance.
Yeah. Was there something that helped you realize, oh, this is a better business move? Like, was there a resource that opened your eyes?
Yeah, I mean, there were a couple things. I think moving to Nashville opened my eyes a little bit on a number of fronts. So without taking up the whole podcast, when I decided to move to Nashville, I had just a couple years earlier spent, hundreds of thousands of dollars building a fancy, 3 fancy mastering studios in Echo Park in Los Angeles. And then I told my partner and my manager, and then my friend Dave Gardner, who works for us still in LA, he moved there from Minneapolis. He had only been there a year. And I said, hey guys, I'm sorry, I'm moving my family to Nashville. And they were not happy about that. But it all ended up working out, frankly, for everybody. The business became much more profitable. It was time for me to move here. I had, after we did the first Chris Stapleton record, after we did Traveler, I do a lot of records with a producer, with Dave Cobb. And Dave and I had been working together for years in LA. And I remember he told me he was moving to Nashville. And I was like, dude, why are you doing that? And then he moved here and struck gold. And so we would talk and he would give me shit from time to time. It's like, why aren't you moving here? Like, what are you doing? Like, move out here, move out here. And every time I would visit, between him and Vance, they just kept telling me to move out here. And they were both really helpful, kind of helping me get my feet on the ground. And, and I got out here, I got teamed up with a really great business management company who does all my accounting. And that was a really big eye opener, just having someone that could just tell me, yeah, Pete, you can't buy that really expensive piece of gear right now. Or this is what you need to do. Or you need to lower your overhead here and you need to refocus a few things. And that was really big for me. And it's opened up a lot of doors for the company and made us run a lot more efficient.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that story.
Yeah.
We probably skipped over a bunch of that kind of like Nashville part in the beginning of the interview, but what do you love about Nashville, as compared to LA? I'm sure most things based on what you're saying.
I love it here. I love that my family can have a nice big house that we can afford with lots of land, and my 5-year-old son can run around on 5.5 acres and he can go to a good school and people are really friendly. The music community here is so supportive. Everyone's great. I love it. And the people here are really nice, and it's a beautiful state. There are things that I miss about California. Living there is not one of them. Living in California in Los Angeles is fucking hard. If you're a multimillionaire, it's a lot easier, but man, it's one of the only places I know that you could make 6 figures and still live paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah.
And
it's like that in places in New York as well, I think.
Well, yeah, for sure. And San Francisco.
Yep. But that's about it.
Yep. But, I'm 47 now, and in my 20s and into my 30s, it was a great place to live. So many amazing things happened while I lived in Los Angeles. I was in LA for 17 years and I spent 3 years in the Bay Area bouncing around before that. It's an exciting place to be. I've seen some shit in LA. I've seen bands play in LA that I would never be able to see anywhere else. I've seen amazing indie films that weren't available to see anywhere else. I've seen great art and been to amazing museums and experienced a lot of cool things there. But then you get to a point you realize, there are airplanes. I could live somewhere else and fly back to see this stuff. LA is a really hard place to run a small business. Very expensive. And overhead's insane anywhere you go. So I absolutely love Tennessee.
Yeah. Middle of the country gives better bang for the buck.
Yeah. That is for sure. Yeah. And I grew up in sort of semi-rural Colorado. And when I was younger, I spent a lot of years trying to get away from that. You just want to move to the city when you kind of grow